Hi there, my name is Demian Borba. I work on the strategic development team at Adobe focused on XD, and I run workshops for XD all over the world. And I thought about having a new workshop focused on all the features of XD here for you to consume and download the files in this channel so you can not only download the files and see everything, but you can follow along. So let's spend a couple minutes together to go through the workshop. So this is the same content that we deliver, I specifically deliver when I run workshops. All right, so let's get started. So first of all, let's go to bit.ly/adobe-xd-workshop. And here you can download all the assets we'll need for the workshop. All right, you can see here I have a folder with some assets, text and images, a pattern library XD document, and then a start file and a final file. So the goal is to get to the final scenario. And here you can see we have a lot of stuff that we'll build together, mostly focused on design thinking. So I'm using a real design thinking exercise that I had. And then we're gonna go through everything you can do, and you're gonna learn how to do design thinking, how to use XD, and hopefully see a lot of features that can help you speed up your design process. All right, so let's make sure we all have the project-start file. And if I zoom out here, you can see on the very top on the project-start.xd file that we have some instructions. So the first thing you can do is make sure you get the fonts. I'm using Futura and Gibson, and just make sure you sync them. So you go to this URL, log in with your Creative Cloud ID. They're free, so you don't have to have a paid version of your Creative Cloud ID. It can be a free Adobe ID, and then you can download them. These are free fonts. And then you can go to your Creative Cloud app up here, go to Assets, and then Fonts, and then you can make sure they are synced. Futura is here, and Gibson is right there. Perfect. They are synced and ready to be used. And just a quick overview of the file, we have a couple of areas we're going to focus, and we're going to start with the presentation down here. And as you go through the exercise, because this is pre-recorded, make sure if you have questions along the way, make sure you add a comment to this video, or you can reach out to me on Twitter. My hashtag is Demian Borba. Here you can send questions and ask anything, and I'll try to answer it for you. All right, so you have the files, you know a little bit of the structure. We're gonna start with the start project to get to the end scenario, build this project along the way. And we're gonna start with the presentation. So here I have a couple of slides created in XD, and I will present them from here, then I will exit and you're gonna start the exercise. So with that artboard selected, you can go to the play button here to start previewing. And I'll go full screen here to start presenting from here. And I'll use my arrows to go to the next slide. Perfect. So this workshop is called Fail Fast to Succeed Sooner. This whole idea of design thinking and learning as you go. Design, prototype, and user test with Adobe XD. And again, this is my information. I work on the XD team, and I'm here to help you build this. All right. So what is Adobe XD? Adobe XD is a brand new tool from Adobe that allows you to design, prototype, and share your work, your designs, your prototypes, get feedback, and then go back to your designs, go back to your prototypes, and iterate. This whole idea of learning and then validating before sending it to production, before sending it to developers. Once everything is validated, then you can hand it off to developers using design specs. XD runs on Windows 10 computers, Mac OS. It has companion apps for iOS and Android, phones or tablets. And it has a web component where you can share links. So you can share links with stakeholders to collect feedback, and you can share links with developers for them to consume measurements, colors, and download all the assets. This is all the XD ecosystem. We're going to be using design thinking as the main framework for this workshop. So if you want to learn more about design thinking, I have a post that describes the process really in more detail. And the link is here, bit.ly ly/design thinking XD. But in summary, this is design thinking. Everything starts with the design challenge. So your assumption, the problem you have, then before jumping into solutions, you really spend some time empathizing with your users. You do research and you can watch people work, you can interview people, you can experience the same tools or problems that they have. Then after you build all that empathy, then you jump into the define phase where you're gonna revisit the problem. Is that the real problem that we're trying to solve? And rephrase, redefine the problem. Then after that, as a team, we go to the ideation phase where you're gonna, in the first moment, we're gonna spend a lot of time doing like just throwing out ideas and going for quantity. And then later we're gonna define the ideas we wanna work with. As a team, we're gonna vote and decide what to work with. And then we're gonna build prototypes. That's the prototyping phase. And then you're gonna test. And then you can go back to any of these phases to, let's say, redefine the problem or ideate again or prototype and test and prototype. And we do a lot of that with XD. So we use XD, this prototyping tool, designing prototyping tool, to build XD. So I can even show you XD inside XD. So for every major feature of XD, we spend a lot of time testing and creating prototypes, validating with users before releasing to the public. And even after it's released, we go back and we make changes if necessary based on learning. I have another post on prototyping, why prototyping is so important, and it's here bit.ly/prototype for success. And if I can summarize that post in one slide, this is it. We're trying to fail as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, to succeed sooner. So this is the idea. Instead of spending a lot of time creating a massive app that has all the code that's ready and tested and all that, we're going to validate that with users with prototypes. So we're going to create cheap prototypes using tools like XD to test and validate before we hand it off to developers to make sure they build it. Adobe is a big example here. Adobe used to release software at every 18 months, sometimes 6 months, and XD ships every month. So every month there's a new update to XD, and we're really trying to validate and fail as fast as possible to succeed as fast as possible. Really trying to deliver value, testing with users. It's very expensive to fail that late. A prototype helps you to make that idea tangible. It helps you to solve conflicting ideas, start conversations. As a developer, maybe you bring developers to these discussions or to build the prototypes together. They can start seeing problems even before you have something built. Like, oh, we're gonna go this route because that's not technically possible. Just an example. So you can start thinking about the build process. It helps you shorten the psychological distance, so you get closer to your application, you get closer to the problem you're trying to solve. It helps you build empathy. Again, we're not sympathizing, we're building empathy, which is really different. We're trying to feel the same pain and feel the same frustration that our user is feeling. It helps us explore options. You can not only explore different options, but you can fine-tune options as you go, as you play with the prototype. It helps you see barriers, like I said before, be inspired, learn and validate. I think everything here starts with a question. So a prototype helps you answer that question, helps you learn. So if you're not learning, it's time to move on and do another prototype and maybe go back to your initial hypothesis. But the real goal here is to learn and to test things as fast as possible, as cheap as possible. And again, we're gonna work smart and not just hard. We're gonna do things more efficiently. All right, so let's get to it. So the project for this workshop is really around this idea of people that are not able to learn, unlearn, and relearn are the ones that will be left behind. And this is a great quote that I saw and inspired me to go through this real exercise, this real design thinking exercise around exchanging knowledge. So that's the inspiration. And now we're gonna get our hands dirty. Let's work, let's make this happen. Are you guys ready? So let's do this. So I will spend some time here with the project. So I'll close the preview window and I'll zoom out. I'm using the trackpad to zoom out, 2 fingers to pinch, and I'll go all the way to the top. So design thinking starts with a design challenge, right? So here I have XD. I just want to spend some time showing you the UI of XD. Here you have your home where you can access the welcome screen, where you can create new projects based on different templates. You can see some add-ons. You can see your recent projects. You can access files, and you can see some resources down here. Then you have your design mode, and now we are in design mode. You have your design tools here on the left. Simple but very powerful design tools. Then you have your assets panel here, your layers. So these are all the layers there. And then very quickly, once we're done with designs and we want to start prototyping, you can click here to start prototyping. And then you have a share mode on the far right here, where you can publish prototypes, design specs, all links that you can create to validate your work up here with stakeholders, and then share your design specs with developers. You can manage your links, revoke them here. You can start recording a video, clicking on record video, and I'll show you all that. So let's go back to design mode here, and let's start the project. So this project started with this challenge. People cannot exchange knowledge easily. That was that inspiration that defined this hypothesis, this idea of how can we have this as a challenge to build something, an app, a website that could help solve this problem. And one thing that I'd like to show, as I see this artboard that's using a web preset. So you can see it has that dimension. And every time I have something selected in XD, the properties in the properties inspector here on the right changes to reflect what I have selected. So now I have an artboard selected, so I see all the properties related to that artboard. I can see scrolling, the background color. I can even play with the background color here if I want. I'm not gonna do that here. And I can activate a layout grid or a square grid if I want to do a square grid. I'm not going to use grids here. I already spent a lot of time designing this. And if I select the text, I can see properties of text, and you get the idea. So this was the beginning. This was the challenge. Then before jumping into ideas, the idea here is to empathize. So what I did following the design thinking process was, let's interview not only the average, like the college student and the professional, but let's also interview some kids, like 10-year-old kids or older professionals, more experienced professionals that are there doing that job for a long time, to get different perspectives, to get perspectives from the extreme, and we call that extreme users. Then I defined some, as a team, we defined some questions based on things that we want to learn and validate. And here I have a couple of tips on how to run interviews and how to prep for interviews. So always ask open-ended questions, always ask why. If you ask, there's this framework from Toyota that tells if you ask at least 5 times why, you get to the root of any problem, which is pretty interesting. Look for inconsistencies, that when you see inconsistencies, there's a lot of chances of finding insights, deep understanding of issues. Look for nonverbal signals, like people moving, touching their head, like that tells a lot. Don't be afraid of silence, respect silence. If you ask a question and it's quiet, leave that silence there. Like don't try to force it to stop. Like that is really, really important. Never suggest answers, never say like this is good, right? Like no, don't force answers, and keep the questions concise. So I have another post if you're interested on how to run interviews. And again, I can show you that here. It's a very interesting, and it has some data on research showing, for example, that they had this research mapping brain activity of people telling the story and people listening to the story. And at one point they had pretty much the same brain activity, showing that they almost had this brain connection with this idea of stories. So again, look for stories. Try to extract stories of people. When you listen to a story, you learn a lot. Then as a team, we went ahead and we created empathy maps with what people said, what people did, and this is all the explicit side of things, right? Everything that you can really capture because it's explicit. And then as an anthropologist, you can spend some time trying to digest what is he or she thinking when they say that, or feeling when they say that, and then you can spend time. So this is the college student, this is the professional, this is the senior professional, and this is the gamer, the kid that plays games a lot. And you can see here a lot of the things, like different than a professional that wants to like keep everything secret and protected because maybe it's a risk to their career. The kid only wants to share, and sharing is good for the relationship. So it's a different mindset. So that's a very interesting insight. And one thing that I did here, I can start showing you right now, is I use symbols. So here I have, if you open the assets panel, you can see I have a bunch of symbols down here. And I have a post-it that I can add to my baseboard or to my project. And symbols in XD help me to have unique content. And if I make structure changes to symbols, like everything changes, right? But the content there for text and images can be unique. And we're gonna spend some time there playing with it. So we saw what design thinking is. In summary, we saw some of the process, how we get to the beginnings of ideas here. We saw the project. Now let's learn a little bit of the selection model in XD. This is really important before we jump into what, like actually touching the file and playing with the file. Let's just do one thing here. So I'm gonna create a new project just to teach you the selection model in XD. So to explain you that, I'll open the layers panel here by clicking on this icon on the bottom left, and I will create a rectangle and then a circle, an ellipse, and another rectangle. So what I'm doing now, I will group these two. So I'll select this guy, hold Shift, and then Command G or Control G on Windows. Now this is a group, and I'll group this again. So if you see here on the layers panel, if I select this big group and I click on that folder, I can expand. I can click here and expand again. And I can see this group has two elements, right? It has this group and this rectangle. This group and this rectangle. If I go here, I can see the rectangle and the ellipse. So now that I'm really deep and I'm selecting the ellipse, which is the thing that's the deepest level here, if I hit escape, I go back to the group, and if I hit escape again, I go back to the group. So if I'm outside and I want to select, let's say the square that's inside this group, I can hold Command, and then I can see some hints, and then if I click, I direct select that element. So this is pretty useful if I have groups inside groups inside groups. I can hold Command, Control on Windows, and then just click and it direct select that element. Then if I keep using escape, it goes back a level. So pretty useful too. So that's the selection model in XD. Now that I have my project here, I want to spend some time showing you layers. So in XD, we have layers in a contextual way. So if I click here on the pasteboard, I can see all the artboards in this project. So for example, if I click here and here, holding Shift, I can see I selected 2 artboards. If I click in, let's say inside this guy, then I jump to the artboard itself, and I'm not distracted by what's on this artboard or in this artboard. I'm really focused on this artboard. I can then double click here to change the name and to hide or show that element, lock it to avoid moving it, or mark for export. One thing that I do at the artboard level here, I like to use emojis. So it's easier for me to find elements later, especially if I prototype and I have a huge list of all the artboards I can go to. If I have those visual hints, it's very easy. And I just double click to rename, and then I call the artboards. In my case, it's I can go to, let's say, emojis, and on the web, I can get emoji.com, and here I just select an emoji that I want. Let me get this guy, for example. Then I go to my artboard, I copied there and I paste here. So now I have that little emoji here. So just an example, pretty fun, pretty useful. It can help you get there. Cool. So that's how I name my layers. Of course, you can move layers up or down and all that. Right, so we are talking about the empathy phase, right? And here you can see you can marquee select elements. And let's say that at one point I want to export this whole thing as a PDF. I want to share this with my team as a PDF. So I can marquee select, click and drag to marquee select all the artboards. Then I can go to File, Export, Select it. Then I can pick PDF and as a single PDF with all the pages or with multiple PDFs for each page. And I can hit export. Now if I look there, I have that PDF, and every page in my PDF has my elements, and I can share this. And this is pretty smart PDF, 400K with all the gradients and all the shadows and everything there. And you can share that way. Nice. So that's how you can export, let's say, your empathy maps or any artboard or any elements here in XD. Once you have the empathy maps created, we jump into the define phase. And here, as a team, as I validated this with my teammates, we really came up with this new problem, kind of an evolution of the problem. Instead of just people having problems exchanging knowledge, the idea is, like, based on all the learnings and mixing the different personas that we created, that we interviewed, we came up with this. People are born to learn and evolve. Teaching can be scary, but once a class takes place, it can transform all parts involved. The learner sees a path for empowerment and inspiration. The teacher tests and validates this path, feeling useful, competent, and confident. So that's how the learner feels and how the teacher feels. That was a great lesson learned. And then based on that, we created some principles for the app, for the solution here. So knowledge for knowledge, always foster sharing, collaboration, easy to teach, easy to learn, help people make memories, effort plus learning equals success. And this is something that will help us as guiding principles as the project evolves. And for XD, we have principles. We had, for example, 3 main principles of XD. One is lightweight and approachable, meaning XD is simple, is easy to learn, approachable, but it's super fast, super light and fast. So I don't know if you noticed, but here I have a lot of artboards. I can zoom in and out. I can pan around with no problem. So performance is a guiding principle, and it keeps us focused. The second principle is remove friction everywhere. So we're looking at the entire UX workflow that you guys have, and you're trying to improve that workflow, and sometimes replacing that entire workflow with something new, something easier, faster, more effective. And then the last principle is transparent and open. Transparent meaning that we have a public backlog, and you can go to Adobe XD. Let me close this emoji. You can go to adobeXD.uservoice.com, and here you can see all of the feature requests. You can see bugs. You can file bugs. You can suggest new features. You can even vote on features here to subscribe to the feature, meaning that if you upvote here, you'll be subscribing to this feature, and then every time the product team updates it to, let's say, feature under review, it goes to feature in the backlog. Sometimes it goes to feature completed. Then you get a notification saying that, oh, that feature is now ready, and you can start using it. And we have a lot of discussions here. So micro interactions, a big one, and AutoAnimate supports that now. And then everyone here, almost 5,000 people, will get a notification saying that that feature is available. All right, so those are the principles for XD, and guiding principles are really useful. Then you can jump into personas, right? And the whole idea with personas is to help you visualize your user and keep you focused. Oh, in this case is Veronica. So once you go through the prototype or you go through the ideation, you could say, is Veronica, will be Veronica happy with this or that? And it really helps you stay focused on your target, your user. And here what I used, and you can see I have a lot of different personas. I have 4 personas here. What I ended up using here is symbols again. So here I have a symbol with this card. And the cool thing about using symbols here is that, let me open the assets panel, and you can see I have my symbols here in the assets panel, I have a list view where I can double click to rename things like you saw there. Let's rename this one. And I cannot rename these ones because they're linked symbols, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about linked symbols in a second. And then I can see a grid view here, and let's drag some symbols here. So persona A, persona. And remember I said you can direct select something. So I can direct select something here and say, okay, this is gonna be me. Let's say I'm a product manager. Then I'm overriding text here, but I can not only override text, I can also override images. So here in Finder, I have a couple of images and I have my picture here. I can then drag that from Finder or Windows Explorer, and I can drag it there. So now I'm overriding images as well. So symbols are very powerful that way. I can override text and I can override images. Very cool. Delete, you got the idea. I'll close the assets panel for now. And these are my personas. All right, then let's talk about ideation in design thinking, right? One of the things that can really help you get inspired before you start ideating as a team is creating a mood board. And I will use Adobe stock to be my resource. And here I have a bunch of shapes. These are just shapes in XD, simple shapes that you can draw with a rectangle tool. And shapes in XD are very smart. One, you can, of course, change the color, but they can have bitmap as a fill, which is pretty powerful. So as you saw with symbols, I can drag something from Finder to get that there. Or in this case, I'm using Google Chrome, and I will use Adobe stock to bring some images. So let's say I want to search for learn and happy. So now I'm using Adobe stock and I have a couple of images here. I can then drag them from the browser all the way into XD. And let's say I have something, let's drag this one here and let's override that one that I have. Let's say I want to move this, like I have this image, it's there as a fill, which is awesome because if I move or change, what's inside never gets distorted. But if I double click, I can define where I want that image. So let's say I want to show her hands a little bit more. Then I click outside to commit. So again, anytime you have an image as a fill, you can double click and it works almost like a mask. And of course you can use regular masks. So if I have that image here, let me drag that again. If I have this image here, I could draw, let's say, a circle. Then I can select both elements, go to Object, Mask with Shape. Then I can double click and move it around and define that. That's the regular masking way. But I can go faster if I just go to any place, Finder or here, and I drag it there, or this guy there. Let's say this one here. And I can double click to adjust where I want that image. So here's a mood board that I can create to help me as a team to ideate. All right, so now we're gonna do the ideation phase. And you know in XD, you can use very simple but powerful tools. One that I'd like to show you is called the repeat grid tool. So anytime I have, for example, I have this rectangle and this group that has two kinds of text, I can select all the elements and then choose here repeat grid, and then I just repeat them. So I don't have to copy and paste and remember how many times I hit shift. If I need to then adjust the padding, I just get closer here and I can adjust the padding to get to a better result. And repeat grids are very smart. I can have unique content, but all the properties I change here are reflected throughout the whole grid. It's almost like a symbol, but I can have a lot of very smart things here. One thing that I can do here is Let me make sure I have the right. I'll do very small here, like 2, that's fine. I'll create space for a lot of ideas here, so let me zoom out more and create a lot of ideas here. Nice, somewhere there. Cool. And I can go one by one and capture all the ideas that we had and then change and get there, but this will take a long time, right? What I have here is, if you go to copy, I have a TXT with 96 ideas that we created during this exercise. And remember the principle of XD about removing friction? I can click here and drag that text file to my area here, and it populates the entire grid. So each line on this text file, which is one idea, enter, another idea, enter, goes to a separate place in our grid. As you can see, I can drag that text file here, but I have to spend a lot of time creating that. Right? I have to spend some time creating a simple text file with no formatting, and it's kind of tricky and it takes time. Normally what I see happening is companies have content in a Google Docs, a spreadsheet, Google Sheets, or as a CSV, like in this case. And here you can see I have a key saying idea number and then idea, and then all the numbers here and all the ideas here. And it'd be awesome to bring that to here. I cannot drag it, but I have the ability of bringing that content now in XD via plugins. So first of all, let's go to plugins, discover plugins. And here you can see I have a list of plugins, and please install Google Sheets. And this is a plugin that helps you bring content from Google Sheets on the web and local CSVs. So let's use that one. So the first thing I'd like to show is we're gonna open the layers panel here, and here I have my repeat grid, and then I have a group with these 2 elements, and then I have my rectangle in the back. There on the CSV, I have idea number and then all the numbers, and idea and all the ideas. So one thing that we can do to prep this to the plugin is we gotta get rid of this group. So I have to ungroup this guy. So I'll select this layer, this group, and I'll do Command-Shift-G or Control-Shift-G on Windows. So now inside my grid, I don't have the group anymore. The plugin needs to have all the elements at the same level inside the grid. They cannot be inside groups yet. All right, so that's it. Now that I have my layers with the right names, matching what's out there in the CSV, I can select the repeat grid here, and then I can go to plugins. We're gonna use Google Sheets. We're gonna load CSV, select CSV, ideas, open. It went ahead and it mapped what I had there with my layer names, but if that was not the case, I could fix it here. So that's why it's good to have both keys the same on both ends, and all that here. And because they're all in the same group, if I hit apply, I get all the ideas here and all the numbers here. So pretty useful. And now everything that I had there came from that CSV directly into my document. Pretty powerful. Then moving forward in the design thinking process, here I have the converge phase. So after spending a lot of time as a team, literally like throwing up ideas, having a lot of ideas, now it's time to converge and select the ideas I want. And what I did here to show you that's pretty powerful is you can select this artboard, and I'll create a new document. I copy, I create a new artboard here, and new document with that pasted. So I only have this element. I can share this online, so I can publish a prototype, a link, and I can say ideas to vote. I can have this as a link that allows comments, or it can have a password, or it can be a public one. I can even create a private link that only emails that I have invited will be able to log in and see this. So let's do it publicly. Maybe add a password, but let's do it publicly. Then I can create a link. Now this artboard is being uploaded to Creative Cloud. And once that's created, I can get this link. I'll copy, I'll go to Chrome. Let me create a new tab here, and I will paste that in. So now I can share this with my team, and this is what we did, where they can see all the ideas. And one by one, they can come here and say, I like this idea. They can click here to place a pin, and they can add a pin there. Or another team member can say, I like this one because of X. So you can ask your team to vote 3 or 4 times, and then you can define which ideas you want to work on. And in this case, going back to the XD document, I'll close this and don't save. We decided to work on these 3 ideas. So that's a nice workflow, digital workflow, where in design thinking, as you know, all the ideas end up in post-its, and the max you can do is take a picture and maybe type one by one. Here you have everything in one place, and you can document that. Very cool. Now that we know the ideas we want to work with, I can go to the information architecture, and here I have a symbol that only has text as an override, so I can go ahead and type whatever label I want there. I'm using the pen tool here to create these diagrams, this connectors, all manual, but I can create and define the flow that I want for my app. Then you can jump into low fidelity prototypes, right? I can say, okay, this is the UI that I want. I want to spend time before getting to the high fidelity scenario. I just want to spend some time low fidelity, kind of creating this scenario. And to create a prototype, all I got to do is go up to this portion here on the UI and click on prototype. And I can say, all right, whenever I click here, I want to go to this artboard. And this is going to be a regular transition from artboard to artboard. And I'll say it can be a slide left in 0.4 seconds. Now I can come here, click on that play button to see this interaction working, learn. I can even say, all right, when I click on this arrow, what I want to do is take me back to my previous artboard. So whatever, if I got to this artboard, maybe coming from another artboard, if I click there, this will reverse that interaction and it will take me there. Maybe 0.4 is too fast. Let's do 0.8. Nice. So it's looking more like iOS. But I don't want to spend too much time on polishing this for real, because again, this is a low fidelity prototype just to help me validate the idea. The other thing I'd like to show you before I get to a more complex high fidelity scenario is, now that we are in prototype mode, I can have this artboard, which is the keyboard, as an overlay on top of this one. So what you can say is, whenever I tap on this guy here, I want to show this other artboard, but instead of a transition, this will be an overlay. As soon as I do that, I get this green box showing me where it's going to be positioned. If I click in the middle, I get a preview, but we're going to change the way this shows up from slide left to slide up. So now as I do that, XD helps me so I don't have to move it all the way to the bottom. Then I can click there and I can see that overlay already running. And then from here, I'll continue my flow, and this is back to the regular transition. So we can say, okay, I click here, then here I go to that artboard and go from there. So this is how you can create simple transitions, how you can add artboards as overlays. And the last thing I'd like to show you is this idea, this notion of fixed elements. So what I want here is, as I scroll in the chat portion of my low fidelity prototype, what I want is, I want to fix this box to the bottom. I don't want it moving. So what I can do is I can select that entire element. I can go back to design mode, click there on the top. So select the element or elements you want to fix, click there on design mode, and then tell it to stay fixed by clicking on this little checkbox here. Now that I do that, it stays fixed. And I can even add transparency here if I want. And you can see what's down shows up, so it's really real time. Or I can even add background blur to get to a more, let me try something darker, like that. And then you can see it's adding blur to what's down there. Pretty useful. So this is how I can create transitions, set up overlays, and have fixed elements. Now that we get a sense of the low fidelity prototype, we can jump into the high fidelity version of it. And here we're going to do a couple things. The first one is we're going to learn how to use gradients. So let's say I want to access or create a gradient here. I will create a rectangle here just to show what I did. So with any element, you can change the fill from a solid color to a gradient, linear or radial. And then you can adjust the gradient here on canvas, or you can adjust it here too. If I click in the middle, I get new stops. If I click and drag outside, they go away. And I can change the color. I can even have gradients with transparency, which creates a very nice effect. So that's what I did here. On this artboard, I have a gradient, a linear gradient, and it goes from this color stop to this color stop, and this is the other beginning. What I did here as well is with that artboard selected, I opened the assets panel, and I can add that gradient here, so it's here. And if I make a change to this gradient, right click edit, you can see it changes all the other instances of that same gradient. This is very powerful, and you can explore different variations very easily just by editing that globally. All right, so the whole idea here with the app is to have some animations, and then the user can learn something. So in this case, I'm gonna learn, and then I'll get here to this artboard with some answers, some suggestions. And before we get here, we see there are a couple missing elements. So now I'd like to show you this concept of linked symbols. I don't know if you notice in the assets panel, I had some symbols with this link here, and they're coming from other files. So in XD, if you have an XD document as your source of truth, you can have them organized by symbols, and then if you copy elements from that document to another document, they stay linked if you want, and then you can keep things consistent. If you make a change to the main one, the copies will get notified and it can update. So let's see that in action. I don't know if you noticed, but in our document, in our folder here, we had an XD document called Pattern Library. I'm gonna open it in XD. And here's almost like my design system, right? I have my pattern library, I have my colors, my text, and some elements. So what I want here is I want this button. I'll go back and I'll paste that here. And then I will command click here to change this to book. So now I'm overriding that text. But this is a linked symbol. The cool thing about having this as a linked symbol is that if I make changes to this guy there, let's do that. I could do it in two ways. I can right click here and say edit in source document, and this would open that document, the pattern library document that we had. And then if I make a change, let's say to black and save, as soon as I go back here, I get a notification that, oh, updates are available. I can then, I'll hit OK here. I can hover here to see the preview. And with that guy selected here, you see it's blue and not green anymore. I can click it to update, and now I'll bring that change back. I'm not gonna do that, so I will go back to that pattern library. I'll undo this and I'll save. Cool, nothing changed. It's all updated. So this is how you can keep, let's say, all of your assets in one single document, and then you can make changes to this and then keep things organized. I'll close the final project. We're not gonna play with that now. Cool, let's add more elements. I'll add these two, learn and teach. They go here. I copy it and paste it. Now they are there. They are linked. What else we can bring? We already brought this guy, so we'll bring it there. Nice. So that's how you can bring assets from your linked document and then keep things consistent. So let's close that pattern library for now. Very cool. All right, so we have a couple of linked elements here that I can, again, as you saw, I can right click and edit. I can unlink the symbol. I can unlink it here as well. Like if I make a local, this will break the connection. It will be a regular symbol. I can say, hey, XD, show me where this symbol is, and then it will highlight that on canvas. Let's do that again. Highlight on canvas. You can see they are here, and I can do the other way as well. So I can select this and say, hey, reveal this symbol in the assets panel. So it shows me there where it is in my assets panel. So linked symbols, pretty powerful. All right, let's move on with this UI here. So now that I have this, I'm in design mode. I'm gonna select this group. I'll use the repeat grid to create another card. I can adjust the padding if I want. And now that I have two cards here, vertical cards, I could also do horizontal ones with no problems. Let's populate this, right? I could say this is a unique content, but we have assets that we can use. So I can say, okay, I have some titles. Let me make this smaller. I have some titles there. I have some descriptions. So you can see they populate. I even have some instructors, so I can bring the name up there. And remember, I was able to drag an image from Finder. What happens if I drag a bunch of images to a repeat grid? Each image goes to a separate card. So I can also bring the classes. And now I have each image or each line in the text field, they go to a separate card here. And then I can explore variations of this design very easily. And as you can see, that change is reflected throughout the whole grid. Pretty powerful, pretty useful. Before we stop designing stuff here and jump more into prototyping features, let's learn how to use Boolean operations to create a pen icon on this area. I can draw two circles, select both with holding shift, then I can align them. I'll use Boolean operations in this case to subtract, double click, access the anchor point, double click on that anchor point to get rid of the handles, click outside, and as you can see, this is a new element, and if you see the layers panel, it's a new element. I can rename this to pin icon. And now that this is a new element, I can even remove the border. Let's use that pink that I had saved in my swatches panel. I can add a shadow here if I want, even a border, maybe a white border would look nice, like that. I don't like borders. I'm a minimalist. Cool. Not even shadow. So that's where I can get a pin icon right there. One thing that I showed, I was consuming a color from the swatches here to add a color. Let's say I want to change this to, let's say, a green. I can, with that color, I can click here to add that color. If I click and drag it out, I remove it. So that's how I can manage my elements there. Not on the sea, right? Something like this. So we're gonna learn how to surf in Oceanside. Pretty useful. So that's how you can use Boolean operations to create your icons. And then I can use file, export, my selection there to export, in this case, in SVG. This is really good SVG that gets exported. I could even optimize the minify the code to be smaller and faster to download. All right, so now let's learn about new features. So with that first artboard selected, we're gonna create some animations. So before I jump here, let's create a practice file. So file, new, and then I'll create a new document with one artboard here. I'm just creating a simple button here with rounded corners. Let's do something like that. I will make it centered. What I want to show you here is this concept of AutoAnimate. So one of the main feature requests that we got in user voice, if not the top one, is micro interactions, the ability to animate elements within the same artboard. As you saw before, I could do animations from one artboard to another. It's almost like I'm moving from this artboard to that artboard, but within the same artboard. Up until now, that was not possible. But let's say I want to create a scenario where I tap on this button and it expands to occupy the entire screen. How can I do that? I just select that artboard as almost like my start state. Then I Command D or Control D on Windows to duplicate. And then I will create the new behavior. So this is technically the same element that I had there, but now bigger. And if I see the layers panel, you can see this guy is named rectangle. The layer name is rectangle 1, and also here is rectangle 1. So I have the same element in different artboards, but in different scenarios. This is a button, this is a big rectangle, but it's the same element. So if I go to prototype mode and I click here, what I want is, as soon as I tap on that button, I want to go to this artboard as a tap. But instead of a regular transition, this would be an AutoAnimate scenario. And we're gonna use ease out, let's say 0.6 seconds. I can hit play here. And that's my animation within the same artboard. I can then click here, go back, same scenario. So this is how you can create animations within the same artboard. You just have to have a start state and an end state with probably the same element. If I don't have the element, let's say here I have a circle, and I will remove the border, and I will make it, let's say it's black, like something dark. But the circle doesn't exist on the second artboard. What's going to happen? It will fade out because it doesn't exist on the other artboard. On the other hand, if I only have it here on this artboard, it doesn't exist here, but it exists on the second one. So as soon as I test that, it will fade in. So this is adding that element. If I want to move it out, I can have the same element here and maybe move it out of my artboard. It is here, but it's out. So now it comes from the outside to the artboard. So this is the concept of AutoAnimate. Cool. And I have another file here that shows a lot of cool examples. So if you go to XD Files Extra, AutoAnimate, you can see that same example that I just showed you, or more examples. So here I have a group that has 2 cards, and the same group here moved to the left, and this little guy here is now on this side. So if I test this, I can create this scenario where I'm auto-animating based on selection. Cool. So let's animate this. So let's see what happens here. If I start on this guy, go to prototype mode, and then I go here, and one thing you can do is tap and then it moves. So let's see that. I tap and it moves. But what I want is, instead of a regular transition, auto animate. And I don't know if you noticed, but I have elements, so they are here as well, but they're transparent. So let's see that running. You can see they move down. This how now button moves up. It's the same element. How now logo mobile, how now mobile logo right here. So that's why it moves up. And this one is my pink button. It's also here. It was here before. White button. And this card here is called group 3357, and it's here group 3357. So this is how I can tap and get there. Another thing you could do here to avoid the tap is, let's say I want to show this for 2 seconds and then I want to animate. So what you can do, you can remove that wire and just click and drag to the middle of the pasteboard, so there's no connection here anymore. Selecting that artboard by clicking on its title, I can click here and say, instead of a tap, this will be a time transition. So what I want to do is I want to stay here for 2 seconds, and once 2 seconds are over, I want to auto animate to that second artboard in 0.8 seconds. So let's see that happening. Command enter, 1, 2. Oh, I forgot to check the destination. That's really bad. So it's mobile 02. I can use the high fidelity mobile 02 here, or like it did that for me, or I could just drag. Yeah, don't forget to link to the destination, so otherwise it's not gonna work. So select that, 1, 2, it animates to that scenario. So let me click here, do it again, 1, 2. So as you can see, it stays there for 2 seconds, then it jumps to that other artboard. Very cool. Then from here, I want to go to this scenario. It doesn't have to be auto animate anymore. This is going to be a regular transition. And let's do slide left. So let's do that. This is already, it already has the overlay for me. So learn, slide left. It had the overlay for me. And it also has this idea to go to this card. So now we saw time transitions. We already saw overlays before, and auto animate, which allows you to animate elements within the same artboard. Now let's talk about a brand new feature that's going to change the game, and XD is the first tool that allows you to prototype with voice. So what I want to do here is we're going to jump to this artboard, as you saw there, right? I can click here to see the keyboard, but if I click on this little icon, it goes to that artboard sliding up. Nothing new here, you know how to do that. But what I want to do now is to create a voice prototype. So in this scenario, I want to prototype this idea of telling the app to search for, in this case, surfing. That's what I want to learn. I want to learn about surfing. I'm Anna here, and I'm a learner. I want to learn about surfing. So with that artboard selected, or an element here, let's use an element so I can have multiple. If I select an element, the benefit of selecting elements is that I can have multiple elements on the same artboard listening to different things. And based on what I listen, it will go to a different artboard. So what I want to do here is I want to go to this artboard, And with the trigger in this case will be voice. And the word that I'm going to use is surfing. So as soon as I type that, I would transition to, as soon as I say that, it would transition to that other artboard. Transition will be that, slide left. Very cool. So let's test that in action. So I'll hit Command Enter. And to test this, I have to press the space bar. So I'll press the space bar and we'll say surfing. You listen to that and you move to that artboard. Pretty cool. And then on this artboard, what I want to do is create a scenario where almost like I recognize that and the app says, okay, surfing, and not only surfing, but I also have more options, more suggestions here. So I can click here and I'll get to the prototyping area here on that guy, and I will say in a couple seconds, let's say nothing. As soon as I get to this artboard, so no delay, instead of going to another artboard, I want to use speech playback. So I can say, here is surfing and a couple of more suggestions for you. That's it. So now let's test that in action. So let's review what's happening here. This listening element is listening to, when I press the spacebar, is listening to the word surfing. As soon as I hear that, it hears that, you jump to this artboard, and in this artboard, I have a time trigger, one-time trigger that there's no delay. As soon as I get there, you will play this speech playback. Here's surfing and a couple more suggestions for you. So let's test that. I'll press the space bar and I'll say surfing. Surfing.
Here is surfing and a couple of more suggestions for you.
Did you hear that? That's pretty cool. Let's do that again. Surfing.
Here is surfing and a couple of more suggestions for you.
Very cool. So I can prototype with voice. Awesome. And this is the very beginning. We'll do a lot of improvements here. Cool. And then we had the chat options already linked there, so I can simulate.
Here is surfing and a couple of more suggestions.
Every time I start that prototype, you will play it back. So make sure you have your volume down. Cool. I have the chat connected there. What I want now is fixing the top element there in this box on the bottom. So let's do that. I will select, go back to design mode, select that guy and this guy and tell it to stay fixed. Let's test. Nice. I'll also do that here. And you might be thinking, why do I have two artboards here? They're pretty much the same. So now I'd like to show you another gesture, another trigger that can be very, very useful, called dragging. So what I want to do is I want to allow the user to drag from this picture to this picture. And to do that, just like AutoAnimate, all I got to do is select the initial artboard with the initial state and then the end state right there. And then I can say, okay, this whole set of images in prototype mode can take the user to this scenario with drag, and it will be AutoAnimate, and a good easing type here for dragging is snap. So it would do like almost like goes back and then goes there and then snaps. And then I'll do the same thing here to take me back to that. So now I have a dragging trigger that can take me from one artboard to another. Then as a user, if I tap and drag, click and drag, I can see that. If I let it go before half of the transition, it goes back to the initial, and if I pass half, then it finishes it. Pretty useful. On that other element here, the AutoAnimate file that I shared with you, what I did is, remember I was able to create tabs here, like to go here and here. That's pretty useful, but I can also use drag to create an even better scenario. So that's there for you. Very cool. As I design mobile apps, one thing that can be very, very powerful is the ability to have real-time preview. So let me show you one thing here. So if you connect your iOS device or Android device to your Mac via USB, as you can see here, all the changes that I make on XD there in the desktop are reflected in real time. And I can have multiple devices connected at the same time, iOS or Android. Very, very useful. So I highly recommend you to test that on your phones. And if for some reason you cannot connect via USB, you can always place your documents in your Creative Cloud Files folder and then load them from your mobile app. The cool thing about running that on the mobile app is that if you unplug the cable or if you go to do some user testing, you can really see that if you unplug that content gets cached, and you can do some user testing to get feedback and watch a user go through your problem. Or if you load them from Creative Cloud Files folder, you can also make them available for offline use. So you can test multiple flows, multiple prototypes with your users. All right, now let's say that I have this web scenario, and what I want now is to create a link for my stakeholders to review, and later another link for my developers to build the website. So here I will, in prototype mode, I will click here, and the first thing I gotta do is I gotta go to the initial here where I have this home, the initial artboard, and click there. What I'm doing here is I'm defining this as my home artboard. And if I zoom out and hit Command A, you can see I have one flow here, I have another flow here, and another flow here. So if I want to share this flow, what I have to do is select the initial artboard. Then I create a simple interaction that takes me from this guy to this artboard. I have a fixed element there, and then I can request booking. Oh, this is a great opportunity to show one thing. I don't know if you noticed, but I go from this artboard to this artboard, preserving the scrolling position. So as I go to this artboard, I checked this option. Let me uncheck to see what happens if that's not there. So what I want to simulate only this part changing, and I already scrolled to the middle of my artboard. If I click here without that selected, it goes to that artboard where it says request sent, but it resets the scrolling position. So to simulate that behavior, I have to go here, and I want to preserve the scroll position, and I was using none because it's web, right? So as I test this, I can scroll down, and because I'm preserving the scroll position, I can get to that scenario. If it's almost like a website today, I could have dissolved because maybe it's a React website that does it more nicely. Nice. So that's how I can preserve the scrolling position of my design. All right, so back to the goal here. Let's share this website. I can click here with that home artboard here, publish prototype. I can say how now web. I'm gonna keep a public link here. I can also add a password if I want, or I can share privately, adding emails as I invite them. I can copy this, go to the link. Anyone that has access to this link will now be able to see that flow, the web flow here. And now that we're talking about web, if I go full screen, this shows me the app as full screen. So this is acting as the real website. So if I hit escape, I exit the full screen mode, and I can say, oh, the top rated area is missing. Top rated area is not complete. This is a stakeholder giving me feedback. And then he or she can even add the area that's not there. Okay, as a designer, I can go back to my design. I get an email, I get a notification here in Creative Cloud showing that I got comment there. And you can see it's setting all the notifications in one place. But what I need to do now is I need to bring data to populate this. And this is a repeat grid, so I'll go back to design mode here. Here in XD, I added a link where you can find where I have this content in a Google Sheet. So this is public, right? I have, again, title, description, location, instructor, images. So back to this place, I can select the repeat grid. I will make sure my layers have the right name. So this is title, this is description, and back there, just make sure title, description. So they're matching the image, the class image, instructor image, all here matching the same names. And I'll use that plugin, Google Sheets, now pasting a link from a public Google Sheet. Continue. This will now find that document, that sheet, and we'll try to map this. If I don't have the right names, I can fix them here. My layer name and whatever I have there on the Google Sheet. Then I can hit apply. And this will not only bring the content, the text, but also all the images from the links. So this is pretty useful. So this, you learned before how to bring content from a CSV. Now you learned how to bring content from a Google Sheet on the web. Pretty powerful. All right, now that I have this there, I can go back here and update that existing link. So now the content will be uploaded. And then if I refresh my prototype link, the content is now there, and I can resolve. If I want to reply to that stakeholder, I can reply right here saying, hey, at Demian, it's now there. And I can add that, and I can resolve that whole set of comments. So I can have whole threads of feedback here. Again, we are, as a prototype, I'm sharing, I'm learning, I'm failing as fast as possible. Imagine if this was all developed already, then it would be a lot more expensive to change it later on. Cool. So now let's say this whole web piece, the whole web side of things here is ready for developers to develop it. I went back to my prototypes, I went back to my designs based on stakeholder feedback, made all the necessary changes. Now it's time to share this with my developers. So again, it's the same process. In prototype mode, make sure you have that as your home artboard. Click there, and instead of a prototype link, I will create a design specs link. And this is a web project, and I'll say how now V1 for developers. I can add a password, I can invite people via email, but I'll create a public link just to show you this. All right, I can copy this link, go here, and any developer that has access to this link, they can see all the screens that are connected. They can click here to see all the colors that are used, all the fonts that are used. They can click on a specific element, let's say this. They can zoom in, and they can see the distances. They can hover all the elements to see the distances. And as a developer, if they want access to, let's say, I'm a developer and I say, I need to download this asset. I can place a pin here. So what the developer is asking here is I need that pin icon marked for export so I can download it. So what you can do here as a designer, you can go back to design mode, layers. I'll call this pin icon, and I will mark this for export. With that marked for export, I can publish a design spec. And as you can see here, I have assets. It's the same asset because they're in repeat grid. I can now update this. It's now uploading only the asset, only the change. It doesn't upload the entire thing again. And then if I refresh this as a developer, I will be able to now select that element and download right from here as SVG or PNG or PDF. So this is really there to help the developer to find all the information they need: colors, character styles, the assets. If they select a text here, for example, you can click here on a property inspector and that text gets added to memory. So I can go there and paste into my code, or I can, let's say I select this guy, I can click here to copy the color. I can click here to copy the font name. And every time I click there, I copy that information as a developer. And you can expect a lot more improvements to design specs in XD. All right, now let's talk about responsive resize. We already saw, and let's use this element here as a sample. So here in design thinking, we're gonna test, right? We have a way to test and validate our work before we send it to developers. And here I have a suggestion based on this research from Jacob Nielsen. Very good research saying that you don't need to test with more than 5 people to get a lot of information, because when you go from no one to one, or in this case 3, you go from nothing to knowing a lot about that problem or about that item you're validating or investigating. And then at one point it tends to stabilize, in this case 6. So he says that you can stay within 5 because you know enough information to learn and move forward with your validation. And here I created some test cards that can help you. All right, now let's say I want to resize this chart to go from, let's say, this big web view to a smaller view that's mobile like that. So what I can do is I can select that artboard and use responsive resize, or just to show you in action, one thing you can do is you can group a couple of elements. So I'll group this and this and this, guys, to help XD understand structure, and responsive resize functionality to understand structure. And now that I have that way, I can activate that on my artboard level. And as you can see, I can go from that big element to a smaller version. So responsive resize, pretty powerful in a lot of instances. So let's get, for example, if I want to get this scenario, I want to go from this web big one desktop version to a mobile version. As you can see, as I play with this, it's doing a very good job. And I can say, okay, I can enter here, and instead of doing it automatically, I want to do it manual. I want to have this content variable, so the width can also be variable. And now, as you can see, it's helping me with that. So responsive resize can really help you resize banners and big UI from desktop to mobile, or vice versa, in a very effective way. All right, so we saw the entire design thinking process running here in XD. We saw the hypothesis, and then empathy maps, redefining the problem with personas to help you guide the implementation, the solution, mood boards, ideas, lots of ideations, bringing content from Google Sheets, from CSVs, from text files, then information architecture, low fidelity prototypes, high fidelity prototypes for mobile and web, how to share that to get feedback, how to share that once it's validated with developers using design specs, how to test, resize elements. But I'd like to end this presentation, this workshop, with the ability to run presentations in XD. So I can use the arrows to go through the slides. But then when I get here, because I can use XD to prototype, I can say, okay, this mobile app link in the middle of my presentation will take me from that artboard to here, and this will be a tap, of course, regular transition. Let's do is, in this case, let's do dissolve with ease out. And from this one, the web one will take me to the web portion. Then if I present now, if I click here, this will take me to the mobile flow. Or if I'm back there and I click here, this will take me to the web flow. Again, so I'm using slides, the same app with slides, prototypes, web, mobile, all within the same flow. So this is all I had for you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Now you know how to design, prototype, share, really create a mechanism for you to fail fast, to succeed sooner, create prototypes, get feedback, go back to your designs, go back to your prototypes, make all the necessary changes, then hand it off to developers using design specs. And if you want to keep the conversation going, please reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Demian Borba, or use the hashtag Adobe XD, and the entire XD team can see that. And we just love feedback. So please keep sending us your constructive feedback. If you find bugs, go to user voice. If you have more feature requests, go to user voice. And yeah, I hope you had a good time here. And thanks a lot for helping us build XD. Have a great day, guys. Bye.